Hello everybody, I'm Rowan6 with Rowan6 Entertainment, and welcome to a new series, a audiobook series of my fanfiction, The Dragon Hero Dovahkiin. The background art for this fanfiction is created by me. If you're interested in me doing art commissions for you, the link to my business Discord is down below. There's also a link to my community Discord, as well as the fanfiction link. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
Outside UA's teacher's lounge. Nemuri was nervous. Why, you may ask? Because she has a major crush on their resident green-haired dragon slayer. Normally she wouldn't consider dating somebody as young as Izuku, but since he is a 25-year-old man who is simply just stuck in his 14-year-old, muscular, and hot as hell body made it okay in her mind. But that wasn't the problem, it was the fact that she now had to tell her secret girlfriend Kuros, who most people know as the Space Hero 13. Normally this wouldn't be a problem either, since both are in a poly relationship, well used to be in one anyway. The last guy that was added to the relationship turned out to be an absolute disaster, which happened 3 months ago. And now she was going to her partner to tell her that she was thinking of adding somebody new to their relationship. Grabbing hold of what little confidence she had at the moment, she walked into the teacher's lounge where she knew that Kuros was. As expected, Kuros was in there and looked like she was doing some paperwork with a cup of coffee. Her helmet was off, which revealed her smooth, unblemished skin, and dark blue hair with gold highlights. Her eyes are dark brown with a golden ring in the center of them. Her eyes always reminded her of those pictures of black holes. Looking up at Nemuri, who just walked in, Kuros could easily tell that she was nervous, and she could probably guess why. Smiling, Kuros decided to start the conversation. "So Nemuri, what do you need? I can tell that you're nervous. Is there something you want to talk to me about?" Kuros said with a smirk. "Shit, she caught me already, I better just rip the band-aid off as fast as possible." Nemuri thought before letting out a long sigh. "Yeah, I want to ask if we could potentially add somebody to the polycule," Nemuri asked. After those words, Nemuri was preparing herself for the verbal backlash that she knew was coming. After all, she was quite angry with the last man who joined their relationship and quite heartbroken when he left. But she was not expecting Kuros just to raise her eyebrow in response. But what shocked her more were her next words. "Does this happen to be the man you've been talking to Izuku about all month?" "Honestly, I don't mind, especially if what Izuku has been telling me is true. Although, I'll have to get to know him a lot better before we make it official, and that's assuming he's interested in the first place," Kuros said with a smirk, like the cat who caught the canary. Promising to herself that she would destroy Izuku later because of his blatant betrayal of her trust. Nemuri was about to ask what her girlfriend had in mind when a voice that came out of nowhere cut her off. "If you two are interested in my Izuku, there are probably a couple of things you need to understand," Sarina said as she decloaked, revealing that she was sitting in one of the chairs. She was currently sipping from a glass that was obviously full of blood. This caused Kuros to jump out of her chair in surprise, and made Nemuri grow in annoyance. "What are you doing here, Sarina? And what are you talking about? What do we need to understand exactly?" Nemuri says in annoyance. She hates it when Sarina pulls a stunt like this. "Nemuri, you know this girl, and how did she get in here for that matter?" Kuros said, a little shocked. She did not know this girl, and the fact that she could get into the UA campus undetected was very surprising and concerning. Nemuri then looked at her girlfriend with a raised eyebrow. "You didn't get the memo that Nizu gave everybody?" Namuri asks a bit confused. Are you talking about the one that was obviously a prank? Kuros said, surprised, which caused Namuri to facepalm. Yes, that's the one, and it was not a prank. We actually have 3 magic-wielding dragon slayers on campus, and she's one of them. Namuri said with a deadpan expression. This made Kuros sit back down in disbelief. Actually, only 2 of us can wield magic, the other one is just a badass swordswoman. But anyway, we're getting off topic. To answer your first question, I followed you. I have a very sensitive nose, and because of that, I could easily tell that you were crushing hard on Izuku. You should also know me and Lydia are also interested in pursuing him. The only reason we haven't done it yet is because when we found out that he wanted to return to this world, we decided to wait, and we also do not mind sharing him with others. For your second question, well, that's complicated, Sarina said, which caused both of them to blush heavily. Getting a hold of herself quickly, Namuri sits down next to her girlfriend and decides to speak up. Well, I have the time, so spill it, Namuri said as she looked straight into Sarina's eyes with a look that said, I'm not going anywhere, so you better tell me. Seeing that look, Sarina let out a long sigh and then started to explain. You see, what I was told from Lydia when Izuku came to Skyrim, he was on the verge of being mentally broken. What Lydia told me and his friends from the companions is that before he came to Skyrim, his life here was beyond any normal human could withstand. Hell, I am surprised that he didn't go insane. If he didn't have his iron will and his kind heart, he probably would have. It took Lydia and his adopted mother Ila several years to piece him back together. But even today his experience here still left their scars that are yet to heal, Sarina said, but after taking a quick sip of her drink she continued. One of those scars is how he sees himself, especially when it comes to romantic feelings. A small part of him still believes that he is not worthy of other people's love. Now add to the fact that very few people actually showed any sort of affection towards him. This made him quite dense when it came to people showing any romantic interest in him, so the normal social cues would go straight over his head. He is also quite nervous around the opposite sex who overly show their affections, Sarina said with a bit of sadness. I see, so we have to make our interests obvious without making him uncomfortable. If it's okay, can you tell us more about that traumatic time and if there are any trauma triggers that we need to know about? Kuros asked. Thanks to her being a rescue hero, she was all too familiar with dealing with trauma. The last thing she wanted to do was to trigger a flashback. Taking a sip of her drink and leaning back in her chair, Sarina contemplated over the idea of telling them. She knew Namuri and quite liked her, but she knew very little about the other woman. Mulling it over for another second, she made her decision and spoke. I'll tell you, but you must agree not to tell anyone else. Anything I say does not leave this room, do you understand? Sarina said seriously. With the 2 women nodding in agreement, Sarina continued. So she told them everything she knew about his treatment here, from the bullying, the daily beatings, suicide baiting, and even the failed suicide attempt and the circumstances around it. The 2 women in front of her looked like they wanted to kill somebody and simultaneously wanted to cry their eyes out. How could anyone live through that? Are you seriously telling me none of those teachers did anything to help him and that fucking All Might had left an obviously mentally unstable child on a rooftop after thoroughly crushing his dreams? Does he even read the mandatory reports on suicide ratings? The majority of them are from the quirkless after all. Kuros said with tears running down her face but with fury in her eyes, it was obvious that she was absolutely livid. Being a rescue hero, she had to deal with a lot of suicide attempt cases, and the majority of them were people who were quirkless. Sadly, yes, but to your second question, according to Lydia, he used to have some trauma triggers to explosions and, strangely enough, the smell of burnt caramel. But over the years he had gotten a good grip over them. The only reaction nowadays is him flinching a bit, but if gets really bad he knows a spell that he could use to remove their effects temporarily. It lasts long enough for him to get somewhere safe before he breaks down. I also know this spell just in case some reason he can't use it, Sarina said calmly. There was silence in the room for a bit before Sarina stood up and spoke. Anyway, if you want to get to know him better, come to the next training session with Nemuri and ask if you could learn some magic. I'm pretty sure he'll be glad to teach you, Sarina said before walking out of the room and leaving the two who remained silent. They stayed there like that, and they would have stayed there all day, if they weren't forced to go back to their classrooms to teach. Just right outside Nizu's office, Izuku yet again was heading to Nizu's office. What was this like for the fourth time this week? It's not his fault that shit happens. He did warn him that his party and himself were trouble magnets. First was the cafe incident, and the second was a house fire with a child still inside. Of course, Izuku rushed in to save the poor kid. The third was when somebody attempted to mug him and his party. The poor guy found out the hard way that you don't mess with Lydia. She pulled a Bane on the poor fellow and broke his back. That's what he gets for showing the two some Batman movies. Oh well, it wasn't like there was permanent damage. They did give him a healing potion after tying him up. Perhaps his back was still injured, and he needed another dose of healing potion? Ah, he will find out when he gets there. Entering the office, he decided to try to head off the annoyance of Detective Tsukachi and Nizu before it got any ground. Look, if this is about the mugger whose back we broke like a twig, I swear. He cut himself off when he noticed the occupants in the room. Nizu was there, but there wasn't any sign of the detective. But instead, there were two drop-dead gorgeous women whom he recognized. The first one was the dragon hero, Ryukyu, also known as Ryuko Tatsuma. The second one was the rabbit hero, Mirako, also known as Rumi Yosagi Yama. They're both wearing casual civilian clothes, but that's not what grabbed his attention. What did was their aura. It was similar to his, and one of his most dangerous enemies. The thought of that bastard made him unintentionally flare his aura, causing Rumi, Ryuko, and Nizu to flinch back a bit. Seeing their reactions, he took a deep breath and calmed himself. He did not need them to be scared of him. That was the last thing he wanted. But what was unknown to him was that Rumi and Ryuko were having a totally different reaction to his aura. All their instincts were screaming at them, and words like alpha, strong, and mate started to fill their heads. Neither of the two ever had such a reaction to somebody like this. Then, as they felt the aura recede back into the hunk of a man in front of them, they could not help but blush, which went unnoticed by the green-haired Dragonborn. But the next words out of his mouth grabbed their attention immediately. "Fos lo strahet? What are you doing here?" Izuku asked in Dovahkiin. This was a test for them. Even though he did not use these words to produce a Thursday, they should recognize it. Because if he's right, these two women in front of him were Dragonborn. And just like that, his suspicions were proven correct, when both of them perked up and looked at him with confusion and a bit of recognition in their eyes. Okay, so they did not understand him but recognized the language, which means these two were untrained in the ways of the voice. That means he's most likely going to have to train them, and that means another long explanation. But before he could start talking, Rumi pointed at him and yelled out. What the fuck was that? I recognize the language somehow, but I know for a fact I never heard it before. Is that your quirk or something? Rumi asked, completely confused and a bit shocked. No, that wasn't my quirk, that was Dovahkiin, the language of the dragons, and before you cut in again let me explain. But first, I'm assuming you two came here because you were drawn to this place by a vibration in the air, or to my aura. Izuku said as he looked at the two. Rumi nodded her head with a bit of hesitation. Yeah, Ryoko and I were out having lunch when this strange vibration went through the air in waves. It was weird though, no one else seemed to feel it, just us two. It also had this strange pulling effect that led us to UA, and the most frustrating thing about it, once we got to the UA gates it stopped. Rumi said, frustrated. Well, that confirms it all right, Izuku said with a sigh. What the fuck does this confirm exactly? Rumi asked, a little impatient. The fact that both of you are Dragonborn, Izuku said, completely serious. Both Ryoko and Rumi simply looked at Izuku like he had grown a second head, but when they realized he was serious, Ryoko decided to speak up. First, what is a Dragonborn, and second, how do you know that we are Dragonborns in the first place? Ryoko asked, confused. Okay, but let me answer your second question first. The first thing that proves that you're a Dragonborn is the fact that you're attracted to what is known as the Thursday. I was showcasing it to one of my students earlier today, and only Dragonborn or full-blooded dragons are capable of sensing the vibrations that Thursday produces. The third thing is you instinctually recognize Dovahkiin, the language of the dragons, which only Dragonborn can do, and finally, I recognize your aura. Now for me to explain your first question, I'm going to have to tell you my story, so don't interrupt me. After saying that, Izuku starts to tell them about what happened to him. His journeys through Skyrim, and what the Dragonborn are. After an hour of telling his tale and assurances from Nizu that what he told them was true, and the fact that their instincts were telling them that they could trust this man. So in the end they decided to believe him. So what happens now? Ryoko asks curiously. Well, it's completely up to you, but I am completely willing and capable of teaching you the ways of the voice. Izuku said seriously, which made Rumi perk up with excitement. Wait, so you're telling me you can teach me how to breathe fire and launch things across the room by just shouting at them? Fuck yeah, when do we start? Rumi said excitedly. She honestly could not wait. If what he described was true, this could make her a lot stronger. And if this man were as strong as he claimed, he would make a good mate. That last thought made her blush. It's going to take a lot of training. Do you think you can handle it, little rabbit? Izuku said with a predatory grin. Bring it on, I can take anything you can dish out. Rumi said as she matched his grin with her own. Well, I guess if Rumi's doing it, I better do it as well. Ryoko says with a small smile and a blush. As she too was thinking about making him her mate as well. As Nizu looked at the three, he just hoped that these three did not destroy his school. Who was he kidding? He better start looking into construction companies.
Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!